Before America had borders, before it had cities, highways, or a name recognized by the world, this land existed in a raw and unforgiving state. It was vast beyond comprehension. Forests stretched for days without interruption. Mountains stood like immovable barriers. Winters arrived suddenly and without mercy. For the first humans who lived here, nature was not something to admire. It was something to survive. Every movement required attention. Every sound carried meaning, and every moment of silence demanded respect. In the wilderness, silence was never neutral. Silence meant that birds had stopped calling, that insects had gone still, that something had changed, and change in nature often meant danger. Long before written language, Native American tribes developed a deep relationship with the land. They did not dominate it, they observed it. They learned that fear was not an emotion to suppress, but a signal to interpret. Fear sharpened awareness, slowed reckless behavior. It kept individuals close to the group. Over generations, patterns were noticed. Certain places felt wrong at night. Certain paths were avoided after sunset. Certain sounds meant it was time to remain completely still. But knowledge alone was not enough. It needed to be remembered, passed on, respected. That is where stories began, not as fiction, but as survival tools. Stories carried lessons without needing explanation. They shaped behavior without argument. They made danger unforgettable. When a story warned of something in the forest, people listened, because ignoring the warning could mean death. These early forms of American folklore were never meant to entertain. They existed to protect. They taught when not to wander, when to stay near the fire, when curiosity could turn into a fatal mistake. Centuries later, when European settlers arrived, they encountered a land that did not behave like the one they left behind. Forests were denser, distances were greater. Isolation was absolute. In Europe, danger often came from other humans. In America, danger came from the land itself. Settlers brought their own myths with them, old fears, old explanations, but those stories quickly changed. The American wilderness did not fit European imagination. It demanded new meanings, new warnings, new legends. Night in the wilderness felt heavier, darker, as if it absorbed sound and intention alike. People began to sense that being alone here was fundamentally different, not lonely, exposed, and slowly stories emerged that reflected this new reality. Stories shaped by hunger, by isolation, by vast spaces where help would never arrive in time. These stories were not about monsters hiding in the dark. They were about what happens to the human mind when it is surrounded by uncertainty, when there are no walls, no lights, no guarantees. American folklore was born from this pressure, from the realization that survival required more than strength. It required restraint, awareness, and respect for what could not be controlled. These were the first ancient habits of the land, habits formed not by culture but by fear, and fear in this place was honest. As humans pushed deeper into the American wilderness, they encountered a force more dangerous than predators or weather: isolation. In the northern forests, winter transformed the land completely. Rivers froze, paths disappeared beneath snow. Food became scarce. Days shortened, nights stretched endlessly. When survival depends on what you stored months earlier, every mistake becomes permanent. Hunger does not arrive suddenly. It grows slowly, first as discomfort, then weakness, then obsession, and finally distortion. Among Native American tribes of the North, this slow descent was observed repeatedly. People trapped by winter, cut off from the group, forced to endure isolation for weeks or months. Some did not return the same. This is where the legend of the Wendigo was born, not as a monster hiding in the forest, but as a warning about what hunger does to the human mind. The Wendigo was once human, a person who, faced with starvation, made an irreversible choice to consume another human. In the stories, this act did not save them, it transformed them. The Wendigo became thin, elongated, and restless, always hungry, never satisfied. The more it fed, the less human it became. This was not a random description. Extreme hunger causes profound psychological changes. Empathy weakens, impulse control fades, survival instincts override moral boundaries. The Wendigo symbolized this loss. It taught that some lines, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. But the legend went deeper. The Wendigo was said to avoid villages, to remain at the edges of civilization, to wander endlessly through frozen forests, because it no longer belonged anywhere. Isolation had reshaped its identity. This reflected a fear deeply understood by early Americans. Being cut off from the group was often worse than death. Survival required cooperation, shared resources, mutual trust. Anyone who placed themselves above the group risked becoming something dangerous. The Wendigo legend reinforced this lesson. It discouraged selfishness during scarcity. It warned against abandoning others in winter. It reminded people that survival was collective. But hunger was not the only force shaping American folklore. Across vast plains and deserts, a different fear emerged, not hunger, but deception. In territories where travelers relied on strangers, trust was fragile. A friendly face could mean safety or danger. The Skinwalker legend grew from this uncertainty. Stories described a being that looked human, spoke familiar words, and moved like anyone else, yet something was wrong. Its presence felt unnatural, its behavior slightly off. The Skinwalker was not defined by violence, but by unease. It represented the instinct to question appearances. In isolated lands where help was far away, mistaken trust could be fatal. The lesson was clear. Not everything that looks human is safe. As settlements expanded, another presence entered the folklore, not hostile, not deceptive, but watching. Deep in the forest, people began to sense they were no longer alone. Large footprints appeared where no animals should be. Sounds echoed that did not match known creatures. Bigfoot emerged as a symbol of something ancient, not a predator, but a reminder. A reminder that nature was not fully conquered, that beyond cleared land and settlements, something still existed untouched. Bigfoot did not attack in stories, it avoided, which made it unsettling because it suggested restraint, the idea that something could harm humans but chose not to. Across hunger, deception, and the unknown, American folklore shared a common theme. The wilderness was not evil, but it was indifferent, and humans who failed to respect its rules paid the price. As humans learned to survive the wilderness, they also learned something equally important: where not to go. Fear did not only create legends, it created boundaries, invisible lines drawn not on maps, but in the mind. The most powerful of these boundaries was light. Fire was more than warmth, more than protection from animals. It created a psychological border. Inside the firelight, the world made sense. Shapes were recognizable, faces were familiar, sounds were explainable. Beyond it, certainty dissolved. This is why so much American folklore emphasizes what happens outside the circle of light. The forest did not need to be dangerous, it only needed to be unknown. Early settlements were built close together for a reason. Isolation was never romantic. It was risky. Cabins stood near paths. Paths led back to groups, and groups meant survival. The idea of wandering alone at night was not bravery. It was foolishness. Folklore reinforced this behavior. Stories warned of what happened to those who crossed the invisible border, not because curiosity was sinful, but because nature did not reward carelessness. As settlements expanded, humans began to believe that they had tamed the land. Trees were cleared, animals were driven back, fences appeared, but the fear did not disappear. It adapted. The wilderness was no longer everywhere. It became something you stepped into. And that made it more unsettling, because now the danger was not constant, it was conditional. American folklore reflects this shift. Legends began to focus less on constant threat and more on moments of transition, crossroads, forest edges, desert highways, places where one world ends and another begins. These locations carried weight. They were spaces where rules weakened, where familiar logic failed. The message was subtle but clear. Safety is not absolute. It is temporary. Even inside settlements, fear found new forms. Strange sounds at night, unexplained lights beyond town borders, figures seen at the edge of vision. Folklore adapted to explain these moments, not as proof of monsters, but as reminders. Reminders that control is fragile, that civilization is a thin layer placed carefully over something much older. People learned to trust routines, locks, schedules, lights, but deep down, they understood that these were comforts, not guarantees. The firelight did not eliminate danger, it delayed it. American folklore preserved this awareness. It warned that stepping too far beyond the border, physically or mentally, carried consequences, not always violent, often psychological, getting lost, losing direction, losing oneself. These stories shaped behavior quietly. They taught when to turn back, when to stay close, when the night was not worth exploring. And even as cities grew and technology expanded human reach, the ancient habit remained. People still hesitate before entering dark places alone, still feel relief when lights appear in the distance, still sense unease at the edge of civilization, because deep within the human mind, the lesson was never forgotten. Safety is a circle, and beyond it, the rules change. Modern America looks nothing like the land where its folklore was born. Cities stretch for miles, highways cut through forests and deserts. Artificial light turns night into something manageable. At least, that is the illusion. Despite technology, infrastructure, and constant connection, the ancient fears remain intact. They have simply changed their environment. The wilderness is no longer endless forest. It is the empty highway at night, the abandoned building at the edge of town, the silence inside a car when there is no signal. Modern fear does not arrive with claws or shadows. It arrives quietly, as a feeling, a subtle awareness that something is wrong, even when logic says otherwise. People still lock their doors instinctively, still avoid certain places after dark, still feel uneasy when alone in unfamiliar territory. These reactions are not taught, they are inherited. The human brain has not changed as fast as the world around it. Ancient instincts, once essential for survival, now activate in environments that resemble the past psychologically, even if they look different physically. An empty parking lot at night triggers the same response as a clearing in the forest once did. A long, unlit road feels no different than a narrow trail between trees. The fear is not about what is there, it is about what could be. American folklore prepared the mind for uncertainty. It trained people to anticipate danger without needing proof. This instinct remains powerful. In modern America, people fill silence with noise, music, podcasts, voices, not because silence is boring, but because silence creates space for awareness. And awareness can feel threatening. Technology has not eliminated fear, it has distracted from it. When distraction fades, the old sensations return: being watched, being alone, being exposed. Folklore once explained these feelings through stories. Today, they are explained through anxiety, stress, and unease. But the source is the same: the understanding that humans are still vulnerable, even surrounded by comfort. Modern environments introduce a new kind of isolation. People are connected digitally, but physically alone. Separated by walls, screens, and schedules, the group has been replaced by infrastructure. Yet the instinct to seek safety in numbers remains. This contradiction creates tension. Ancient habits designed for survival in the wilderness now operate in cities that never truly sleep. And still, fear emerges in elevators that stop between floors, in quiet suburban streets at night, in places that feel temporarily abandoned. American folklore did not disappear, it adapted. The monsters became feelings, the warnings became instincts, the stories became behaviors: avoidance, caution, hesitation. These are modern expressions of ancient knowledge, knowledge learned when mistakes meant death and carried forward into a world where danger is less visible but still possible. The environment changed, the mind did not. And that is why ancient American fears still shape how people move through the modern world, even when they believe they have outgrown them. Fear was never meant to disappear. From the beginning, it served a purpose. It slowed us down when speed meant danger. It sharpened our senses when distraction could be fatal. It kept us close to others when isolation meant death. American folklore did not create fear, it organized it. It gave shape to instincts that already existed. Stories were not designed to frighten people without reason. They were designed to be remembered. A warning spoken once could be forgotten. A story could survive generations. That is why these legends endured, not because people believed them literally, but because they felt true. Over time, the wilderness receded, cities grew, technology filled the night with light and noise. And yet the fear remained, because fear does not belong to a place. It belongs to the mind. Modern life has changed the environment, but it has not changed the brain that evolved within it. The same instincts that once reacted to rustling leaves now respond to empty streets, unfamiliar spaces, and moments of sudden silence. This is not weakness, it is memory. A memory older than language, older than stories, older than civilization itself. American folklore survives because it reflects this truth. The monsters were never the point, they were symbols. Hunger became the Wendigo. Distrust became the Skinwalker. The unknown became Bigfoot. But beneath every legend was the same message: pay attention, respect your limits. Do not assume control where none exists. In the modern world, fear is often treated as something to eliminate, something irrational, something outdated. But fear was never meant to paralyze, it was meant to guide. It reminds us that not everything is predictable, that safety is conditional, that awareness matters. When people feel uneasy without knowing why, they are not imagining danger. They are responding to patterns learned long ago, patterns that once kept entire communities alive. This is why these ancient habits still surface in moments of uncertainty, why silence still feels heavy, why darkness still demands caution, why isolation still feels unnatural. Not because we expect monsters, but because we remember vulnerability. American folklore is not a collection of old stories. It is a record of how humans learned to survive a land that could not be dominated. It teaches that fear, when understood, is not an enemy. It is information, and information is power. These ancient habits continue to shape how we move, how we hesitate, how we seek light, and how we find comfort in others. They are not relics of the past, they are living instincts, quietly guiding behavior, silently influencing decisions, persisting beneath modern life. The land changed, the stories changed, but the human mind did not. And that is why fear never truly left. This is The Ancient Habits